Hey, this is Eric Westrich. Today we're at Aquillius and we're with the founders, which is MyPhuong Lei, who is the president, and Leah Villegas, who is the managing director. And they're founders and they're here and they work well together. They're like peas in a pod. We see them, even though I can't say there aren't challenges that a startup like this has, they work really well together. And they seem to have one of the things that I first knows about, they seem to have a lot of fun in doing that. And so they remain very calm even when the world is falling apart, which I guess as a founder is a good skill to have. So how'd you guys meet?
We met in graduate school.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Leah was we were at the University of Florida in the pharmaceutical science department. Leah was already there, right? And then I joined in
Mhm.
2005.
Yeah. So I was about in my third year of grad school. Like MyPhuong said, it's in the pharmaceutical sciences. Yeah, in the middle of Florida.
And did you guys kind of just slowly get to know each other, or was it pretty instant?
We
Oh.
got to know each other because I ended up doing a rotation in her lab.
Mhm.
Okay. And how'd you go from just knowing each other to, hey, let's found something together? How did that happen?
Yeah, it's quite an endeavor. Let's see. Um,
So let's see. So I think for me, I had some industry experience in biotech before. So after I graduated from undergrad, I went to work at the Genome Center at the University of Washington for a couple of years, and then left there to join a startup biotech company in Bothell, Washington. And then I actually didn't go back to graduate school until I was like 28, 29 years old. So it's not your typical route, I think, to getting graduate school. Um, and so my interest actually was never to stay in academia. But after graduating, I ended up going to academia to the Institute Medical Campus at the University of Colorado for about 9 years. And I think during that time of meeting Leah, it always has been, I think we should go out to industry. Have you considered biotech? And Leah was really adamant to stay within academia.
So how do you yank her? What was the carrot you used? Did you hold her by gunpoint, or you asked nicely? How did you get her to leave
my
this
well.
academic world and go into something as crazy as this?
Well, my pathway was a bit more straightforward, right? Like MyPhuong was saying, I went to undergrad. I was kind of exploring different career pathways. Ended up kind of liking the research pathway, and so that's why I ended up in Florida in the pharmaceutical sciences research division. So did the grad school for 4 years. That's where we met. And then I actually went on to my first postdoc over at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, while MyPhuong was still finishing up her program there. So did postdoc and then for about 2 to 3 years, and then came across another opportunity for another postdoc position and a faculty position at over in Colorado at the Inteview Medical Campus. And that's kind of where we got back together and started working on a lot of projects together. We wrote grants, worked on projects, worked on therapeutic development projects together. Went for some patent applications, things like that. And that's where we really got more into kind of like really how to translate technologies, from the early stage, bench research to getting closer to commercialization, right? So we actually took workshops and courses over there at Anschutz about entrepreneurship and commercialization. Got a little bit more familiar with how the IP realm works, how to kind of strategize an IP strategy and things like that. Um, and yeah, got learning into more about like entrepreneurship. Got also into the VC realm. We did a lot of work with Rocky's Venture over there, and so we're kind of like in that realm of the startups and angel investing and VC investing and things like that.
Take us back to the first
Yeah.
conversation where she said, Leah, Aquillius, let's do it. What was that conversation like? How did it
With
go?
Aquillius specifically.
What did you say in that first conversation? We know eventually you said yes. What was that first conversation like?
Yeah, I think it was more of like a natural evolution to that, to that conversation. It wasn't like one day, oh, let's do Aquilius. MyPhuong can go more into the story of actually the first company that we co-founded prior to Aquilius, which kind of led into how we got into Aquilius.
Yeah, so while we were both still at the university, we co-founded another company here in San Diego called MicroTech. And the way that came about was Lee and I came here to visit San Diego for a conference that we were attending, and we ended up meeting with my brother, Tree. And we had gone to this conference, and there was this company who had developed this device, this pill that you can pack it up with drugs and have, an animal or a person take it, and then they could control when they could release the drug so they can do all of these PK, PD studies. And I'm like going, that would be awesome if we could ever have this technology in our hands. And so I had this pamphlet and we met up with my brother Tree for lunch and we were talking about this and he turned to us and he said, I can make that for you. And I'm like, what do you mean you can make this for me? He goes, that's what we specialize in is we make microelectronics. And what's microelectronics? Because those really miniaturized devices. That's what we do. That's our expertise. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that's what you were doing. Um, and I think that kind of just started the whole conversation the first time around. And then we're like going, well, Lee and I were thinking of maybe we would be interested in starting our own biotech company one day. And my brother at the time was president of his previous company. And he was saying, yeah, he was really interested in maybe exploring starting another company of his. And so, it was just an initial thought. And then a few months later, we came back to San Diego for another conference. It was just the luck of the draw. And we met up again and we're like, how serious are we about this, right? And so that's kind of when the whole idea started. And we co-founded MicroTech.
So
And
why
so
move from Microtech to Aquilius? Why aren't you the Microtech wizards that are spending all your time focusing on that?
so one of the things that we had envisioned for Microtech was to create a kind of a sustaining arm of the company. And with Tree's expertise, that was in the manufacturing side, manufacturing of electronics. And so that's when he kind of started looking for customers, growing that side of things. Leah and I are not engineers. We're not manufacturers, right? We're scientists. We're interested in research and product development and coming up with stuff. And that was the intent of what we were going to do with Microtech. So Microtech had this vision of being able to develop our own technology. The first step was kind of creating that manufacturing capabilities in-house. And so we would service customers. And the running joke was, in time, we would be developing our own devices that Microtech would then have to start turning away all these manufacturing customers because we would be manufacturing our own technology, our own devices. But then COVID hit. And so in 2019, so we started Microtech, I believe, in 2015, 2016. Lee and I were still in Denver at the time while Microtech was ran by Tree, the president. And then in 2019, we ended up moving to San Diego to help with Microtech. We got in an SBIR grants and whatnot. And then COVID hit and we shut down for a day and then we got back up the next day because we were considered essential medical because we were making all these medical devices for people. And so, Lee and I, we don't know what it's like to work from home because we were at work helping helping Microtech and its employees figure out working during COVID times, right? Do we mask? Do we need to separate, 6 feet? And so it was very haphazard. And it just lucky that both Lee and I have a science degree where we could kind of meander through the data that was coming across, right? And so we were lucky. We survived. We had multiple shutdowns for long times while there was no testing early on, and then testing happened, and we had to figure out when to test and when can people come back in. So that was a struggle, but we grew pretty quickly. So before COVID, there was probably about 6, 8 employees. Post COVID, we probably grew to 40, 50, 60, 70 people. And we grew so fast because it was all about manufacturing. And I think by the time that turned around, I think Tree could only really focus on the manufacturing side. And I think the IP development, the research stuff kind of got pushed to a corner. And I think Lee and I got a little bit bored, I think is probably the right word. I'm not quite sure, right? It wasn't what we had wanted to do. And so I think that started us thinking, can there be something else that could energize us, right?
So Aquillius, you're talking about who was involved in that conversation? Was it just you two, or was somebody else involved in this?
It was mostly us two. Of course, Tree was in the conversations too because we were,
Right.
working on the transition over.
Okay, Microtech's still down the street and going strong, so that's good. That connection's still there. So you just move next door, basically. So it's not
Yeah.
like you said goodbye. Totally.
Yeah.
So what was when you came up with this idea of Aquillius, what was the biggest hurdle? You guys have lots of experience doing things. If there was the number one hurdle that you said, this was our biggest challenge, what was that?
For Aquillius or for starting
Aquillius.
of Aquillius?
Yeah, for Aquillius. You have this idea. Now you have to make it a reality.
Yeah, I think the biggest hurdle for us is we're new to San Diego. And because of COVID, we didn't really have a chance to go out and meet people and interact with the ecosystem of San Diego. And so that I think was a big bottleneck for us. Um, and then I
Because we
think
were
once,
also, we're also looking at a different model than what we're used to, right? Because, we're used to kind of like a product development, getting that up to, a certain MVP level, and then, bringing that to market, right? Now we're a company where we're very, customer facing. We're, very much into marketing and sales at the moment, right? And, to be able to do that successfully, you really do have to have, that network base of potential partners and customers, right, to kind of buy into the ecosystem that we're trying to build. And yes, I agree. We're pretty new to San Diego. We just moved, into San Diego at the end of 2019, and COVID hit, and the world shut down. So we were, pretty much isolated within ourselves. And when we moved into this building to get things started, to get the lab spaces built, we wanted to start our marketing efforts about the space that would be available soon to the scientific community.
Who was the first
and-
person that you talked to that said, wow, great idea?
Let's see.
Tree.
Yeah.
Because we needed Microtech support, right? So
Right.
we're technically a spinoff, right?
Yeah.
We had to get the investment to start this.
Outside of your club, so to speak, outside of your circle, who was the first person? I'm sure you talked to a lot of people. Who was the first person that really just lit up and said, wow, that sounds great?
Well, this kind of takes me back to when we did first open, like move in and open our doors to partners. We were actually, working with Insperity at the time with Monica and Insperity, and they had recommended for us to connect with Richard Lynn, actually, and I don't know if you're familiar with Richard Lynn, but he's one of the founders for a CRO vivarium here early on that was, bought out by Explorer and then later Charles River. Um, and so he was actually one of the first people who came through our space. We met with him, and I'm sure he can tell you his his version of the story of when he first met us. And I think that's kind of when we started to explain to him what we're trying to do here, the business model, the different resources that we're trying to provide for the startup community. And I think he's been a fan ever since.
Let's get let's get specific, because we could go all day and
Yeah.
say, "Oh, I love it. It's great. It's a good idea." What's something
Uh,
specific somebody said? If you can think of something they said, "Wow, this is great. It's different because." What can you tell, any examples that anybody you talked about said, "I'm excited about this because
I
something
think I
different"?
think what Richard has made a lot of comments about how he's excited by us because we bring in people with different backgrounds. It's a diverse group of individuals, right? It's not just bringing in someone who's just working on drug development. It's bringing in investors, it's bringing in students, it's bringing in people from other technologies that he would have never had a chance to meet. And I think he's excited about that diversity so that you can have these conversations and how can you potentially collaborate with someone who's developing a different technology to potentially help you develop your technology.
So you're talking a lot about diversity, which is really important. New ideas, new people, new backgrounds, but there's something else that you kind of alluded to, and that's how do you bring all those different people together? Because it
yeah.
has to be easy to find. You have to reduce friction for people to talk to basically accelerate that
Mhm.
connection of diversity, basically kind of a multi-sided ecosystem, bringing people together. So who has to come together to make this work? You talked about manufacturing, you talked about diversity of companies, diversity of people. Who else do you need when you're mixing up the recipe? When I open the box, they make my own Aquillius and I pull it off the shelf and I go, instant Aquillius, and I mix in the ingredients. And so I know you got to mix in a building and lab space and people and diversity. What else goes into that recipe?
Yeah,
What
so you got your manufacturers, right? And it's not just manufacturers, it's really a lot of the service providers, right? There's a lot of things that go into the mix to help make a company work and become successful. Not only operationally, but a bunch of other different things, right? The manufacturing actually comes, a little bit later down the line, but you've got to you're anywhere from your lawyers and accountants, right? To the regulatory specialists to kind of help navigate through the FDA regulations. So all this expertise and services that's required to
So you're
make
talking
them,
about business and marketing expertise. You're also
yes,
talking about
marketing,
compliance and IP
yeah,
protection and
yep.
road mapping and
It's a
finding
complicated
through
system.
that.
Hmm.
We've also kind of talked about investors. They need funding
Right.
to get through there. So we need funding, we need investors, we need a sense of community that you're talking
Mhm.
about, bringing all these people together. Um, and of course, you've talked about the ability to get the resources for the right equipment and at the right time. So
Yeah.
you've got clean labs and bioreactors and all that kind of exciting things that all those life science companies need to do. If there's one ingredient that you're working on right now that would be your most important ingredient, what is that? What do we need to mix on that you're spending most of your time working on right now?
So I think for me, my concentration is on Aquillius and just making sure that we have the resources that these startups need. So it comes down to facilities, right? It comes down to equipment, comes down to putting in the clean rooms. We're now putting in a vivarium, and the idea is all of that's in one place, right? They can do their research and streamline the operations so that they can quickly develop their technology. But as you had hinted at, a big portion of what they need is monies. And I think that's the other focus, and that's where Leah's leading, which is the venture arm of Aquillius, right? So we're now fundraising for our fund so that we can actually invest in these startups and actually provide them the money that they need to grow and develop their IP and their business.
If I was to pull the Aquillius box off the shelf, the first thing I'm saying is Aquillius. I see that you're talking about an ecosystem that brings together everybody who cares about it, supporting and accelerating life science companies to where they ever need to get to, whether that's proof of concept or prototyping or manufacturing or whatever. Where'd the name Aquillius come from?
So Aquarius is actually a combination of two words, Aquarius and willow. And the idea behind that with Aquarius is water is very important to life and to the growth of a seedling. And I think that's the other portion of that is the tree, that with water you have the seedling that grows into this magnificent, beautiful tree with all these branches, and the branches kind of represents all the connections that you need, right? So you to support the growth of your company. And so that's really where Aquilus came from.
Okay, so the ecosystem's job is to help with the seed and help it grow and connect into communia, if I get that right.
Yes.
Okay, so if so the job is to welcome people, build community. I mean, you have lots of events, you have symposium, you're working on a women's health event in San Francisco beginning of next year, basically pitch competition where not only connection, but funding, those things you talk about. So MyPhuong, if you couldn't do this job anymore, they said you are forbidden by law to do this particular job. You can go back to anything else. What's the one thing you would miss most that you wouldn't be able to do every day that you can do right now in this job?
I think the thing that's great about this job is getting to meet founders who are passionate about their technology. And I think there's that layer of excitement about that. And this is kind of why we had created Aquillius, is how can we help support them so that they are successful, so that they can finally make that impact with that technology they have. And I think that would be the thing that I would miss out a lot, is being able to interact with all the founders.
And Lee, if they were taking away your responsibilities, things that you do, what's the one thing to say, no, you can't have that, that's mine, I love doing that? What would that be?
I love the investment side of things. I love the same way as MyPhuong loves interacting with the founders. I love interacting with the investors, the ones who fuel the capital for this, innovation ecosystem. And it's great to see that these funders are basically just as excited about the technologies coming out as the founders themselves, right? And it's great to see this ecosystem of everybody being excited about great technologies that are coming through, and they want to help build it and help, make it successful and help bring it to commercialization so that it gets out into the market, into the real world, and into the hands of real people.
So for the foundation of this one-stop shop that brings all this ecosystem together, you're almost done finishing your building part. what's the most exciting thing that's going to happen in the next 1 to 3 years for Aquillius? I know there's lots of things, just you only get to pick one though. We don't have time to go everything. What's the one thing that's you're most excited about that's going to happen? How is the world going to be different? One thing that's going to be different because of Aquillius.
I this is the hope. I don't know if it will come through.
That's
Our
all we're
hope,
asking for.
our hope is that people come together and help each other out, so that one day you might have a founder who develops software, you have another founder who's AI, you have another founder who's doing a device, and you have a founder who's in life science, and they come together and they go, oh, that's a great idea. That's another great idea. That's another great idea. How can we actually come together and form a new company so that we can develop that product? I think that would be amazing, because I think that's where something very unique can come out, is when you finally have a mingling of different know-how and expertise coming together and go, oh, I never really thought that could be done, but with your help and with your help, we can actually create something totally new that's not out there right now.
I love that. That's my favorite thing, by the way, is seeing helping all those things come together. And Leah, any thoughts for you?
I just want to echo that. I think what we're doing here is building that ecosystem of
Okay,
a
so
lot of
let's
different
talk about
players.
the ecosystem then.
Yeah.
In your mind, is the ecosystem San Diego? Is it California? Is it the world? Where do you think this ecosystem will be in 5 or 10 years?
It starts in San Diego.
Yes.
But we've been interacting with a lot of companies, a lot of founders, and a lot of investors, really nationwide and internationally.
So global ecosystem. You heard it
Yeah.
here first. The idea is to get it working here and let everybody do it, because as MyPhuong brought in, the more diversity, the more different ideas, the more power into what you can do and the more you can reduce risk. So, you're talking about opening this up to even more ideas, more capabilities, and opening up from everybody from all places in the world. Pretty broad vision. That's great. Is there anything else you want anybody to, if there's one other thing you want people to know about Aquillius, what would it be?
Come by the place and visit us, join us, be involved in the ecosystem.
Very good. And if they want to know where to do that, where is the number one place they should go to find out more about you or Aquillius?
Yeah, go to our website, or you can find Leah and me on LinkedIn.
So that's Aquillius.com. Everything else should be in the information about. Thank you both for what you do. It's always a pleasure connecting with you, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Eric. Great talking to you.